big fight bookings took place this past weekend, and they were announced, and it clears a lot of things up. Justin Gaethje versus Dan Hooker at UFC 313 on March 8th here in Las Vegas. So UFC 312 is the one in a few weeks in Australia with um, Dricus Duplessis and Sean Strickland, Zhang Weili, and Tatiana Suarez. But 1 month later in Las Vegas, we got that one, 5 rounds, co-main event, reaction to that. Danny.
I love it. I think it's a great fight, and I've been a big proponent for Dan Hooker to get big fights because for whatever reason, like we see the Gages, we see the Poiriers, the Chandlers, those are like A-list sort of lightweights. Dan Hooker's not really there yet. He's kind of like B plus. So he does fight the Claudio Puelles, the Jalen Turners, those type of fighters. But like I feel like the guy should be considered an A-lister. Like he's given us really good fights. One of my favorite fights was his fight at night against Dustin Poirier a few years back. Too bad it was at the Apex, if I'm not mistaken. And I feel like that was a great fight, and a lot of people are unaware of it still. I think it's time to put Dan Hooker against those bigger names because he's probably not going to be champion. Let's face it. But damn, can he give us amazing fights? So this is the type of matchups that I want to see from him. So I'm happy with that. The only thing that I do dislike about this fight is that where does that leave Poirier? Because I was convinced, and I've been a big proponent of that trilogy against Dustin Poirier for Dustin to retire. I mean, I think that is the perfect, right? They're 1-1. They main evented a pay-per-view without a proper belt. Obviously, the BMF was on the line. Yeah, do the trilogy, 2 OGs, great fighters. And now with this booking, Hooker and Gaethje, I wonder if maybe that leaves out Dustin Poirier trilogy with Gaethje. So that's the only thing that I dislike about it. But all in all, like it's going to be a war. There's going to be blood, and I can't wait for it.
I was going to go to you guys, but I know Mike is usually in tune with what's happening with Poirier's career. So since he's been brought up, that is a good question. What do you think? Where can we pencil in Poirier as a possible return for him since he stated he's going to do one more?
I think it happens probably early summer. You hear a few different things, and this is not like official reporting, so no one out there like aggregate me or anything. But I do think they are trying to look into an event in Louisiana and maybe have something in New Orleans for Dustin's final fight. Get to do it in his home state, which would be amazing. As far as the opponent, just look at kind of who's available and who's not booked now at lightweight. The one that really stands out to me is Max Holloway. I think you could maybe pencil that as like high on the list of what could be in the running for that fight. Do that as the main event in Louisiana. I'm sure Max wants those 2 losses back. That one breaks my heart because I love both those guys. The last time they fought in Atlanta, watched the whole thing through my fingers. It would probably be another amazing fight, but I wish that wasn't the case. But just in the process of elimination, I feel like that's where we're trending. But I do think if they need some big fights for that Miami card, Dustin could also be in the running for that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Goes your thoughts on Hooker versus Gaethje, and then when you're done with that, let's move into what's going to be the main event, Ankalaev against Pereira. But first, the co-main event, 5 rounds for these 2 lightweights.
I think the first thing that popped in my head was, can we bring Stitch back? I mean, that's going to be destruction. Those 2 guys, they don't know how to not keep their foot off that gas. Like it's going to be a lot to prove there for Justin Gaethje, to the fans, to himself. I see him coming forward, and Dan Hooker, I see him inviting that. That's just the type of guy he has. He's had this resurgence in his career, and I think this is time where he can get a little respect on his name. And then, Alex Pereira and Magomed Ankalaev. I mean, come on, man. What Alex Pereira has done is he's translated into must-see TV. It doesn't matter who you put in front of him. We all have to watch it. And I think this will be his toughest challenge. And especially if he can survive that wrestling, if he can show us that he has that in his game, boy, will we be looking at him in a different light.
For sure. And like I noted earlier, Ankalaev, a devout Muslim, will be doing a lot of his training throughout Ramadan. And for those that aren't familiar, Ramadan is a Muslim a month of observance where you cannot drink or consume food, drink any liquids or consume any food through between sun up and sun down. Now, it's been done by other athletes. I remember Hakeem Olajuwon would play for the Houston Rockets through that. And I know Bilal Muhammad has fought through that, but a lot of athletes have just taken it off. Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying that the ones that have taken it off is because they just didn't man up. I think a lot of them are just so devout into their religion that they don't want any distractions. In fact, some of them need some time to get off that cycle. So therefore they don't fight, like, let's say, the week after or anything. But Ankalaev is right in the storm of this thing. So much respect to him there. And Pereira is finally taking on what many people could feel it could be his kryptonite. Although Ankalaev has said, "Hey, I'm going to stand." He stood in his last fight the whole time, so this should be a good one, man. What are your thoughts on this one, Mike Bond, when you heard about it?
I mean, I felt this was coming. This was the fight to make. The timing of it is just, a little rough for Magomed, but sometimes this is what you got to do. And, Alex Pereira said in his interview that I alluded to earlier with Megan O'Leary, he's like, I said the UFC, I wanted this fight on this date. And like, I picked the time frame, and it's picked at the time that's, most inconvenient for Magomed Ankalaev, but that is the champion's advantage. Alex Pereira saved the UFC all through last year. He was the MVP, a lot of people's fighter of the year. So if he makes the request, and the UFC needs a main event on that pay-per-view in that time, damn well they're going to take it. And for Ankalaev, you got to do it under these unideal circumstances. Unfortunately for him, we're coming up on 3 years since his draw with Jan Blachowicz for the title. He probably should have been fighting for the belt immediately again after that. It's taken this long. So you got to do what you got to do. And you see his tweets out there, whether they are written by him or someone else. This man is talking a big game. So he is either going to become the new champion in glorious fashion or face one of the biggest crash outs in a defeat that we've probably seen in recent memory, given the comments he's made. So I am very excited for this fight. Alex Pereira has got a lot of favorable matchups, I guess you could say, in terms of stylistic things for his opponents. This is absolutely not, and I will be annoyed if Magomed Ankalaev goes out there and at least doesn't try to grapple him a little bit, because if he just stands in front of him and gets knocked out, you're going to be like, bro, you just another one who lost out on their chance because they get, I guess, like sucked up in the aura or style of Alex Pereira, and that would be unfortunate, but great for Alex Pereira if that becomes the case.
In the chat, Spider Moose says Pereira versus Pereira versus Ankalaev is going to be epic. But then he says it's like intermittent fasting. Get over it. No, man, you can't drink. I get the part about you could consume your food later or, before the sun comes up. Yes, but you can't also drink throughout the day. And these world-class athletes are always hydrating. I've seen a lot of athletes in other sports go through this. It's not an easy thing. It's not as easy as to dismiss as intermittent fasting. Danny, what are your thoughts on this epic fight that's been booked by the UFC in the light heavyweight division?
Finally, this fight should have happened last year, but in my opinion, Ankalaev got skipped over 3 times because he was more deserving than any of the fighters that competed against Pereira. The 3 fighters that competed against Pereira in 2024. So we know that the UFC likes Alex Pereira a lot. Obviously, he's their star, probably the best thing that could have happened to them in the last half decade or so. So him winning, him champion is good for the UFC. So you understand some of the decision making, but this was inevitable. Like if they put anybody else in there but Ankalaev at this point in time, I mean, I would have thrown a riot, because it's just, what is this? At some point, you do gotta sort of cater to the sporting fact of this thing, of MMA. So finally, this fight is being made as the right fight, is the biggest challenge for Alex Pereira. I'm really interested in it. It might not be as sexy as Khalil Roundtree versus Pereira in terms of styles, but I really want to see how good Pereira is, because certainly a star has done a lot for the sport, but we need to see him against a proper wrestler, and he's getting that in this matchup. I do want to put sort of my conspiracy theory hat back on. It is interesting that this fight is being done in Ramadan, right? Like it might have just been coincidence, the way the cards play out, right? But no. I guess if you do have interest to maintain Pereira as champion, this kind of would be an appropriate, spot to book him against Ankalaev and kind of stack the deck against him. And Ankalaev, seeing what happened in 2024, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't be keen on skipping this opportunity, because maybe it might not come around and he might have to face another killer and maybe lose, and then everything's over. So, very interesting fight. I love it. This fight should have been made a year ago.